Great, just to check you can hear me fine.
Yep, you're audible.
She'll be back in a second. I think she...
Just as the live stream goes up.
Yeah, the usual. It's fine. Yeah, she joined.
Sorry about that. My Zoom just automatically closes even if you press the thing. Okay. I'll start in a couple of seconds. I take POIs via chat. I'll start in 3, 2, 1. Better to do a couple of things in the speech. First, I tell you what the exact comparative is, and then go through all of the sort of nuanced decisions that you're going to have to weigh this debate upon. And then lastly, a lot of weighing on how we sort of interact with sort of success in clubs and how we feel about that. Cool. What is in the actual comparative in this debate? Note that the comparative is that some clubs in the status quo nowadays do have fan ownership. The likelihood analysis of this being a reason, like of this thing existing in status quo, is just the past management or the previous owners not delivering so well enough. So the owners decided to give the power in the hands of the fans to appease them, to have no people leave or to have some type of backlash. To the extent to which this is a debate about like technocracy versus democracy, just football, what we need to prove is in a world where all clubs do this on net, we're going to have like worse decisions being made and fans not being satisfied, meaning the comparative of this being a natural thing that happens in the status quo in some nuances, in instances is going to prove it's still better than having everyone do it on net. I do agree with Georgia that in terms of like the board, it's basically like probably some types of like fan, like sort of fan groups and like the people that have been in the longest or like the older people, and then like they have their own councils and they elect basically a board that decides on a couple of things, probably like teams, coaches, and staff, which are going to focus the most on our analysis, and also some type of transfer budget. Cool. Now let's jump straight into it. What type of like nuanced like football analysis we actually think here. Look, they're going to be unpopular decisions that probably should be made, but fans are not going to be likely to make, right? Look, what we are thinking is that like they're voting like on the heads of the boards that are making these decisions, meaning the ones like appointed now are directly responsible towards the wishes of fans, right? Know that being extremely pressured by fans' wishes proves questionable in a couple of ways. We're going to analyze two. Here, the first one is going to be is that specifically if you're looking at the coaching, which like very often fans interpret like that the coach is the one that sort of is very often to blame when things sort of go to shit when your club is not doing well because you have so many players and they're just not working, right? The reason why this is important is because then based on your success or if you fail, fans very often turn like to blame the coaches, and then what most clubs do is genuinely they sort of do either replace coaches or stick with them. What is in the comparative analysis between what happens when the fans are the ones controlling this or the boards feel responsible to this versus the status quo? I think two very problematic things can happen. The first one is either when your club is doing badly and fans are mostly going to make it on coaches, do you want to remove this person as fast as possible, right? Why does this happen? It's because you feel like you're sort of panicking, right? Because you need to catch up with other teams in the league, right? Because you have an important match coming up. You feel like we need someone to genuinely fix this as soon as possible. What is then going to happen is going to lack consistency long term. Because even if you remove the coach that you genuinely dislike now, the new coach that is going to be appointed is going to be a person that still needs a lot of time to adapt, right? For a coach to do well, it's just enough for them to be like a good coach that knows like some football strategy, because most of them can do it. It's having like a personal connection to the players, knowing them through and through, and knowing what like takes them off or what they do well and not. And for that, it takes a lot of time, right? But what is going to happen is that obviously they're not going to do amazingly as soon as the new coach jumps in, because he needs more time to adapt. But then the feeling of panic is going to start kicking in again. They're going to just keep trying to find a new coach. This is just basically by me ranting about Spurs. But what is going to happen is that you're not going to ever allow people to have like enough sort of long-term consistency to ever actually stay within the club and get more accommodated to players long term. This is going to impact your success as a team and how you do long term, because the players can never rely on sort of having like one specific coach and opening up to them and trusting them. And also, secondly, you're not going to have that reciprocal relationship happening. The second thing that also could happen, which we see in the real world happening, is a completely different other end of the spectrum, which is equally as problematic, which is very often sticking to path dependency due to emotional connection. Know that when you're picking coaches or picking the people who to be on the board or the staff, very often it's intuitive to appoint a specific coach that is an alumni or like a retired player that players have like emotional connection to, you know, because they've grown up watching them. So like Ole in Man United, right? The problem with this is that after the point where you're appointing them because you trust them, because you have some emotional connection, you want to see them represent your club, what is going to happen is after a time, if they're not doing well, you're still going to believe that they should be there because you remember them like from those past days, and you just keep putting your trust in them, and the fans just still love them for who they are. That is going to be a problem because the fans are always going to be more likely to sort of still stick with this person or accept that they're completely rejecting someone that literally made their club what it was like 10 or 20 years ago, right? Meaning that you're either going to completely lack consistency in how you interact because of the fear and then directly pressure them to the board, or you're just going to stick to constantly making bad decisions, which is still going to mean like the teams and the players are going to feel like they're not doing well when you transfer to the coaches, but you're still just going to keep pushing to being there, which like long term just completely decreases the trust in the club over time. What is then the comparative? In status quo, people on boards are appointed by owners who are usually companies responsible to sponsors and investors. The difference is there are a couple of points of weighing here. First one, in the qualification, their primary profit incentive is obviously for the club to do well. They're not susceptible to emotions or panic, meaning they're more likely to take their time and assess all possible outcomes and bite the long-term bullet versus the short-term, meaning making decisions regarding like investing in certain players or certain coaches, even though fans maybe won't like it short-term, but they have certain reasons, certain statistics to believe it's going to work out in the long term. Secondly, know that profit incentives do align with doing well. We want to invest in the most talented players or like where we see potential in, or the coaches that we see that have a future right to stick with. Our goal is to have a dynamic football with a specific brand so we have the biggest amount of fans still invested. So that aligns. Before I go on, I'll take closing government. No, OG?
Yes, we go.
Yes.
Yeah, so sport is only of value when it is entertaining and what fans enjoy. Why does it matter on performance?
Exactly, I'm going to get into right now. Before that, just to give one response to like one thing that Georgia did, academies in development, note that there's a massive incentive from investors to invest in these in status quo. You don't have to spend as much money so you can ration more in the future, because like they're literally like your like own coming from your academy, so you have to pay huge amounts of money because you don't have like, your own academy like PSG does. And secondly, you want to be able to campaign or like a local youngster that people can relate to, like Trent from Liverpool, like being read through and through. Is something that fans are going to be more responsive. There are massive investments to still invest in it. Note that I think that being successful in most cases is logically prior to truly enjoying football, which isn't to say that fans are not going to stick with them, because obviously for identity they will, but you're just going to experience more frustration long term. Like when you're going to the pub and with the mates and like the yelling, or like you're happy, going to the game feeling confident you're not going to suck and going to do well, being proud of wearing a certain flag and colors are something things that are directly aligned. So far, the only harms brought by OG were like some investing in academies. We think that when it comes to nuanced long-term success, even if you have to bite the bullet that fans are going to be satisfied for some time, we can claim like the likelihoods of our club is doing more well long-term based on the decisions. And I think you can still like a club because it's your identity, but it's an extension of yourself because you are either born somewhere or you made a dumb decision to support Spurs. At that point, what is going to happen is that you're going to enjoy seeing the club do well because it's something that you have made the right decision, or people around you also feel like you're doing well, and you feel just more confident you're going to enjoy it long-term, going to give back more money to the club and enjoyment. For all these reasons, please vote opening opposition.